The therapeutic attitude of willing acceptance is built on a foundation of courage, curiosity, and compassion. Willing acceptance is not a one time decision, but rather an attitude that you have access to like a muscle. Muscles that are used are made stronger. The more you use your muscles, the more you are able to use your muscles. Similarly, the more you intentionally shift your attitude towards one of acceptance, the more you will be able to shift your attitude towards one of acceptance. The best way to think about acceptance is by its opposite, resistance. What you resist persists. When you resist against your thoughts, feelings, and sensations or memories, they will become more intense. The opposite of resistance is allowing the internal experience to be there, and that's known as willing acceptance. It's human to resist against pain. The way you resist against internal pain will cause you greater suffering. Courage, curiosity, and compassion are skills or tools that you can use to make an attitude of willing acceptance more likely. Courage is the ability to respond effectively in the presence of fear. Curiosity is the desire to know something. Compassion is recognizing suffering and taking action to alleviate it. Let's start by talking more about self compassion. Self compassion is recognizing your own suffering and taking action to alleviate it by learning how to relate to it effectively. According to Kristen Neff, there are three components of self compassion: mindfulness, kindness, and common humanity. Mindfulness is non judgmental, present moment awareness. When you are mindful, you're focusing on current thoughts, feelings, and sensations as opposed to ruminating about the past or worrying about the future. Your attitude towards your internal state is non judgmental as opposed to being critical or comparative. Kindness is warm, gentle, and friendly. When you're being self compassionate, you aren't just aware of the present moment, refraining from self criticism and refraining from engaging from the past or the future. Your attitude is friendly, it's inviting, it's turning towards that experience with warmth and gentleness, as though you're hoping to have that very experience. Common humanity recognizes that suffering is pervasive in humans. All humans suffer, and every moment includes suffering. By recognizing your common humanity, you understand that you and your suffering are no more or less important than anyone else's. Other people have experiences just like yours. You're not alone in your experience of suffering. Let's talk more about curiosity. When you are curious about something, you really want to know about it to understand it. Anxiety often makes people disinterested in their minds. You might only want to understand your experience long enough for the anxiety to stop. You might not even want to know that experience, but rather would prefer to take medication to stop it. Medication can be helpful for decreasing your sensitization enough to give you space to observe your experience. But the capacity to observe your experience with curiosity, like you really want to know it, is crucial for willing acceptance. If you're wondering whether you're curious about your experience, look at how you're behaving in response to learning about suffering from an anxiety disorder or OCD. Some behaviors that convey curiosity about it are reading about it, listening to audiobooks or podcasts, watching videos, joining a support or an advocacy group. All of these behaviors are ways to get more information and more understanding about your suffering. They push you towards acceptance rather than pulling you away from it. Self-monitoring is another great way to build curiosity. It sounds like a simple task, but staying with your experience long enough to observe it, to notice your triggers, your thoughts, your feelings, your sensations, and your urge to act can be really challenging when you're anxious. Also, many people don't like their own answers when they self-monitor. Self-monitoring becomes an opportunity for judgment, and that feels aversive. When you self-monitor, give yourself credit for showing up to the task in the first place. Remember that you wouldn't have to self-monitor if you already had a friendly relationship with your anxiety, so it might be painful when you first observe what you see. Suffering is pain plus resistance. You might feel pain when you observe yourself, but you'll suffer less over time if you go towards it without resistance. Finally, let's talk about courage. Oftentimes when we think about courage, we think about heroic deeds that become remarkable outcomes. That's one version of courage. Courage also occurs in little moments. Anytime you feel fear and you choose to face it and act within your values, you're acting with courage. When I ask people to tell me what they're proud of, I'm really asking for a moment of courage. Avoidance undermines your courage. Avoidance impairs your life and causes you distress. You either can't do things you want to do because of it, or you do them with great distress because of how avoidance creates, maintains, and intensifies your anxiety. Your avoidance doesn't just make your anxiety disorder or OCD worse, it's also disempowering. It seems like there's no consequence when you avoid because it immediately feels better. But over time, it will make you feel distant from yourself. Making and breaking commitments with yourself makes it hard for you to trust yourself. Courage is not a personality trait. It's not something you either have or you don't have. It's a skill that you can build if you work on it intentionally. Making reasonable commitments and courageously keeping them will restore your trust in yourself, regardless of the outcome of that commitment. Perfectionism can also undermine your perspective about your courage. Those that suffer from anxiety and OCD are courageous every single day. It's courageous to get out of bed knowing that you're going to face fear. Getting out of bed and facing the day is acting with courage. If your perfectionism tells you that you have to do what you have to do and it has to be in a certain way, that will be elusive or unattainable, and you'll lose sight of the everyday courage you're already living with just by living with an anxiety disorder. When you give yourself credit for the courage it takes to keep going, you'll get better and better at accessing that courage when you need it. In summary, the therapeutic attitude of willing acceptance occurs when, in the presence of suffering, you observe your suffering with warmth and friendliness, a non judgmental present moment awareness that includes understanding your connection to others. You are able to describe your suffering curiously with a strong desire to understand it, and you face your suffering courageously in accordance with your values, regardless of how you feel.